Good morning and Happy New Year. Good to see everybody. My talk this morning will actually be a little bit about New Year's, what we think of as new and some similar topics, but I kind of think of this January weather as this crisp weather is like perfectly appropriate to the sense of newness, kind of a crackling freshness as you just navigate outside. And it's a time of transition and renewal. I think it's a time where we can kind of reflect on those things, what it means to us. So it's a quiet time of year, silent time of year, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. And in order to talk about this a little bit, I wanted to first just touch on a few things about Buddhist study and sort of wrap all this together as we move forward. But when I was thinking about what it means to study Buddhism, I thought a little bit about what it means to just study something in general, or learn something or practice something. And I think when you think about those different examples, and I think of even things like New Year's resolutions, where we're kind of dedicating to something new, maybe we want to learn something or change something in our life. Any situation that's like that, I think you can find a common denominator in the sense that we are searching for something that we don't currently have. So again, if it's studying something or learning something or looking for something new in the new year, there's this common thread of it's something that we don't have. And I bring that up because it really sets in contrast a more subtle look at what Buddhist teachings are. And that is, it's a particular type of teaching that's pretty unrelated to what we normally think of as learning something or changing or finding something different, in the sense that the study of Buddhism is actually recognizing what we already know. So it's very unique in that way. It's a study not of something that we don't know, but of something that we actually do know. An analogy I was thinking of to maybe sort of paint the picture of this a little bit is like if you were in a spaceship and you crash landed on another planet and you're thinking it's a brand new, different place, but actually you realize that you've crash landed on Earth. And this talk is not about Planet of the Apes, by the way. That's like the main theme in that movie. But so I think it's similar in some ways to that analogy. So it's like realizing where we actually are. And that analogy even goes a little bit deeper too. When I think about it, we are here on Earth. You know, it's a realization that we actually are here, but how are we any different than what the Earth is itself? And I think Buddhism has a similar quality where it really helps us understand that this is where we are and this is actually what we are. And I think we'll go a little bit deeper into that too as we move along here. But the question then can arise is, you know, how can we study this? It seems pretty obscure, you know, it's something that we already have or something that we already know. And in that, I think there's a part of that sort of points to the direction that actually there's nothing that we need to say about what experience is. So this is a study of understanding just awareness itself, or it's our study of understanding what our life is, which is something that's always here and present with us. So we're not going anywhere. We're just being here. So maybe that's one way to kind of clarify what the study is. I'll bring in a quote from a Zen teacher in just a little bit here from Katagiri Roshi. He's a Zen teacher who helped bring Zen to Minnesota. And he says, this is simply about being one with your life. So I thought that that was a phrase that really clarified, that clarifies this type of teaching in a lot of ways. So it's different than a perspective of looking for an endpoint or a certain objective, that this is really about finding an awareness without end, to really find that engagement of awareness without any notion of a beginning or end. The story of Buddha's life actually kind of captures this in some sense. After his quest to really understand the human situation, he went through asceticism, which was a practice of, what would you say, extreme deprivation. So that was pretty common in the time. In a way, it was thought to break through to a new understanding, but the Buddha tried this and basically did not reap any beneficial insight for him. And at that point, he recalled a time when he was just a young child. He was sitting at the edge of a field while it was being worked by his father's workers. And he was just sitting there quietly in this moment. So again, after this extreme asceticism, he's remembering this childhood memory. And he remembered just sitting there quietly and noticing almost like an innate, settled quality of experience that was just there. Without trying to do anything, he recalled this experience. And I think this really speaks to what our practice is, that this is a practice of just life activity. It's not about striving or straining after something, but actually just constantly recommencing in what is actually new and fresh in each moment. So it's, again, different perspective than we may take in a lot of different ways in our life. Suzuki Roshi, I have a few quotes from him as well. Suzuki Roshi is a Zen, 20th century Zen teacher, the author of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I think maybe a few of you probably recognize that title. Suzuki said, before we open our mouths, we are already expressing the big existence, including ourselves. So before we open our mouths, we are already expressing the big existence, including ourselves. He also talked about teaching. And in this next quote, he talks about, what's the phrase here? He's talking about understanding ourself, basically. So he's talking about Buddhist teaching. And he is, in doing so, he's making a clarification that in studying Buddhism, we're not studying like the teachings of Buddhism necessarily. We're studying ourselves. We're studying our life is what's happening. So the way he phrases this might be a little unusual. He says, so the purpose of talking about ourselves, our studying ourselves, is to correct the misunderstanding we have when we are attached to a particular temporal form or color of the big activity. So another instance here where the teachings are seen in, I think, quite a different light than we would think of teaching in general. So he's saying that we're studying our life, studying experience itself, living life. That's to help us to see this common misunderstanding that we have because we very easily become attached to temporal form and color. So this is a reference to the thinking that comes up in our daily life. And it could be about anything, it could be feelings or an idea that we have about something. And it's pretty easy for us to get wrapped up in that. He says temporal, so our ideas are based around time, what we have now, the past, the future. It's all idea based. So that's why we continue to come back and look at our life, I think is what Suzuki is saying. So he's saying that the study is not to like find kind of a philosophical nugget there to try to understand what's going on. He's talking about becoming very familiar what life is, but then also as a part of that, really becoming very familiar with what this misunderstanding is about being attached to temporal form and color. Because, there's a reality of that when it happens in our life. It just comes up that way, and that's what our life is. So that's what the practice is, the study, the practice to come back to what's familiar. I think it can be kind of tricky in a lot of ways because we'll read about Buddhism and it really just seems to have a kind of an inflection. Are we sort of draw from that there's some kind of understanding that we get or some special experience. I think it's just very normal for that to happen. And I think a part of that is like having an intellectual handle on something is pretty attractive, to like, even in some sense, we compare our understanding to other things and then we kind of feel good when it seems more logical or something, or it seems to make more sense than other things. But in the end, I think in some ways we can sort of move through that, what would you call it? A bit of a hindrance in a way in trying to go after some special experience or a particular understanding, or because when we think about it in that way, I think what we're sort of accidentally doing is setting up an understanding versus confusion. If we're putting that up, or if that's kind of coming up as a sense of the study is going to help us solve that problem or move from one to the other, all we have to do is recognize is the idea quality of what that is, a special understanding versus confusion. So all we have to do is just notice what that is. And again, as these teachers are pointing out, this is just a reminder to resume this activity that's already happening. That's really what the practice is, not about getting anything special. And Suzuki Roshi talks a little bit about practice as well. I thought I'd bring in a quote on that to transition from study to the practice side. He says, your practice, and I think what he means here is like a formal practice or studying with a teacher. He says that is a part of your everyday life, a part of your incessant activity. In this sense, there is no difference between the practice and the activity you're having in everyday life. So to find the meaning of your life in the zendo, in the sitting hall, is to find the meaning of your everyday activity. To be aware of the meaning of your life, you practice sitting meditation or zazen. So he's, I think, equating a sense of inseparability between whatever we're doing, whether it's a formal sitting in a meditation hall or riding a bike or picking a stick up from our yard, whatever it might be. And for me, it helps to clarify another sort of detour that we may kind of find ourselves going on, and that is that we may think of practice as something that is going to accentuate our life or something that may kind of transform our life. But here, Suzuki is giving this kind of fresh explanation or instruction about what he believes practice is, and that is to simply be aware of the meaning of our life. And I think maybe we could tell a little bit of a difference there. You know, understanding the meaning of our life is feels much more here and now, as opposed to something trying to transform or try to accentuate. And then when we think about accentuation, I think again we can see the quality of idea there. And so this is noticing the subtlety of our thought, noticing the subtlety of how this notion of accentuation, it's actually just an idea. You know, there may be practical, helpful things about ideas like that, but it's so easy to not notice that we're kind of getting into thinking there rather than actually knowing the meaning of our life. That's what practice is. It's to stay here. Suzuki gets even a bit more subtle here, and because some of the wording that we've used up to this point, for instance, the meaning of our life, I think he even helps clarify that this is not about kind of going inward. It's not about focusing on like personal perspective or anything like that. So he expands this out in a pretty unusual way. He says, because people have no such understanding of Buddha or undivided activity or just reality as it's showing up, because they have a misunderstanding, they think that what they do is the most important thing without knowing who it is that is actually doing it. People think they are doing various things, but actually Buddha is doing everything. So I think this is kind of a provocative statement, and it's a teaching that you don't run across too often. He says that Buddha is actually doing everything. Buddha means awakened, awakening. So another way you could say that is actually the reality, like the full living of reality is actually doing everything. So another teaching that is brought up at times is the quote, "You are not it, it actually is you." And I think when we quiet down and we notice actual experience, the notion of subject or object, or the notion of a subject being aware of some bigger thing, actually can drop away. It can just be direct experience. And that's, I think, what Suzuki's trying to help us notice the subtlety of. And this particular section here, so he says, because of this confusion, people think that what they do is the most important thing without knowing who it is that is actually doing it. And for me, especially this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, there's a lot of things in there where it's kind of like, how do I make sense of what he's saying here? And I think only when we can just settle down and forget ourselves will it be realized that this undivided activity is actually everything. So again, only through experience can we really understand what Suzuki's getting at here, because I think in some ways it can sound a little confusing. For me, I mean, it sounds pretty striking. This is to say that this undivided activity of reality is doing everything is not something that we hear every day. He also says that, and again, in an effort to clarify what the teachings are, what Buddhism is, he says that Buddhism is not some particular teaching. Buddhism is just truth, or it's just pointing to truth. And so he says Buddhism is just truth, which includes various truths in it. And I thought I'd bring this quote in as well, and that it helps understand that our practice is to, again, resume this awareness that is always what is happening. But it also, our life does include difficult things that come up. And that's what Suzuki is getting at, I think, here. Buddhism is to help us recognize the truth of here now experience, which also, which is actually a complete undivided activity. It's direct, it's unmitigated, yet our life is showing up here. There's also difficulty and all kinds of different things that we need to navigate in life are also, but it's all that is included in what is ultimately beyond description. So I think it's his way of pointing that we can actually be at ease in this world of easy versus difficult. There's a way to recognize that if we just really do our best in life and we fully participate, we can actually be here and respond to those difficulties that come up in life. So as I was mentioning with that analogy of landing a spacecraft on another planet, it's almost like we're on Earth, yet we're yearning for Earth. And I think it can show up as sort of yearning for a special experience or a new type of understanding. There'll be kind of this feeling of wanting to, just like have something different show up in a way that illuminates something. But when I was thinking about that impulse, I think that yearning or that pang that we feel is actually that we already actually do know the truth of this direct experience right now. So it's like, rather than, what's really going on there is not, I want to find something different. It's actually, we do know this and we know that we can practice this. We know that we can live our life completely right now. And it's something that we can definitely feel deeply about. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, just to wrap up here, a quote by Katagiri Roshi. So Katagiri and Suzuki were contemporaries. They were Japanese-born teachers who came to America to help the spread of Zen in America. And Katagiri says, if we see our life as an object separate from us, it is easy for us to create fear and anxiety and confusion. When we see our life, we feel many things. This is called experience. So the experience of fear, anxiety, confusion, whatever it might be that shows up. And then it continues and says, of course, it is okay, but it is not the total picture of the way to live. We must put it aside and be one with our life. That is all we have to do. And this reminded me of a Native American proverb. I apologize for not knowing the source of this. It was something that my mom told me a few years ago, just in relation to fear, anxiety, and confusion. And this proverb, I don't know if that's quite the right term, but it was the image of traveling through life and the trouble, maybe a trouble will come up in our life, and the representation of that was a stone on the ground. And we would just pick that up, observe it, and then set it back down, and then continue on. So it's a practice of not casting away or trying to get rid of things. It's really to respond appropriate to our life as best we can. But we can, as Katagiri says, just set it aside and actually be one with our life. So be what that, be this movement or this full activity. And in the proverb there, it's, us just taking one step at a time and traveling through life. Katagiri talks about this as full dedication to our life. And for me, really, it is as simple as that. It's a simple practice. It's not necessarily so easy. It's coming back to awareness in all the different aspects of our life. But we really, I think we can, it's a reasonable practice. It's something that we can do. We can renew that. And in respect to the New Year's, I think, there's this feeling of fresh renewal. And I think the nice thing about the teachings here is it helps us understand something that is maybe a bit elusive to us at times. And that is that in actuality, there's not a single thing ever in our life that's not perfectly and thoroughly new and fresh. So that's what this practice is pointing to, is that we can actually be that activity of complete perfection and thorough newness, which I think also in it contains the sense of transition, so we can respect these auspicious times, solstice and the new year, and we can reflect maybe on our life of the past year and maybe things that we want to rededicate to for the upcoming year, that can all be carried inside this understanding that actually our experience is this experience of ever freshness and ever renewal. So that's pretty much all I have for today. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments or any New Year's resolutions that you want to reveal to the group. It's okay to mention the resolutions right now, right? Because they're still alive. We don't want to talk about them in February, right?
Could you just read the quotes again?
Which one?
They were good, all
I'll see. I could pick a couple.
of them.
Yeah. So Suzuki just talks about the practices being part of our everyday life. And finding the meaning of our life in the sitting hall, our formal practices, is to find the meaning of our everyday life. And then he reminds us actually that this reality of awakening is the full, he says, actually, Buddha is doing everything. And I would say that the reality of this full activity, that is doing everything. And there's actually a Taoist teaching that the way does not attempt to do anything, yet nothing is left undone, which I think is a similar type of understanding there. He says Buddhism is not, his points at truth, and it includes various truths in it. And then again, Katagiri at the end there says, of course, these things are okay, fear, anxiety, confusion, but we must just put them aside and be one with our life. That's all we have to do. Yeah, some good quotes there, sure.
Thank you, Jed. Your talk clarified for me that line from the Song of the Jewel Mirror Awareness. You are not it, it is actually you. That was very helpful.
Okay, yeah.
The whole talk really, I thought, made that very clear.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's quite a line.
It is kind of cryptic until what you said was very helpful in helping me understand it.
Yeah, thanks. That is a unusual sounding phrase. We're maybe not used to hearing that. I think there's a freeing quality in it too.
What?
A freeing type of quality in it. Because the practice can be, it can become difficult when we sort of saddle ourselves with, you know, taking on some kind of idea of how we are going to do this, and, you know, the effort that we're going to have to put forth. And actually, we don't have to do that at all, because it's not about getting sort of some grandiose outcome. This reality is the complete thorough functioning of thusness, and there's nothing that we need to do besides just be here. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Hi. Hello, I had a question. One is that you said if you're fully participating in your life, what would you be doing if you're not fully participating in your life? I have another question too.
Mm-hmm. You want examples from what I do? Like,
Well, but
like
anyone does that's not, when you're not fully participating on
Yeah.
it, what
That's
are
a
you
good-
doing?
That's a great point. I think you're sort of providing a teaching there that no matter what we do, regardless if it looks like being distracted or whatever else, there's no way that we're not fully participating in our life. So it's just a matter of, again, redirecting back. And I think that's sort of the beauty of a practice like this, is it could be an experience of being in a contentious argument, or being, at work where there's just tons of things going on. We can actually just collect the mind and be here again and stay here. So mindfulness is to return to this moment, and meditation is to stay here. So yeah, thanks, Mary. I like that. Uh,
Okay, one more question.
sure, yeah, go ahead.
Something you said was that if you're engaged with your life, um, just day by day with what is here and now, you begin to see the meaning of your life. But I thought meaning was a conceptual word, like somehow then you're putting it, well, I am doing this, or, what does that mean? What you meant? What were you saying there?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think because it's Suzuki's term that I'm using there, and I think he uses it in a particular way, as he does with a lot of terms. Generally, meaning is a word that would it basically, in its regular parlance, we're, if we're looking for meaning, we're looking for something that means something else.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to really watch out for. It's mentioned here at Dharma Field quite a bit, and it's very helpful to know, to have like a meaning of life. I think it's helpful to understand that if we're trying to substitute an idea of what our life should be, that's not what's being talked about by Suzuki.
Okay.
So when Suzuki says it, I think it's more like another version of the term meaning of life is like finding a true importance, or meaning of life in a way that is something that we find a deep resonance with, like, this seems important to me. And I think in this case, finding a importance in really dedicating ourselves to our life, as Katagiri says, full dedication, is basically what Suzuki's saying there with that meaning of life phrase. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up
Thank
as
you.
well too,
Thank
Mary.
you very much.
Sure.
Thanks. How you doing?
Good.
What I've learned so far with meditation is being not only present, but trying to quiet my mind, because a lot of times I have a lot of thoughts, and I'll be trying the best way I can to quiet my mind. So with meditation, it brings me back to, with the breathing exercise, it helps me to quiet it down a little more. And I've been learning since I've been reading, like, how to what's the word? Control, like, be, what was it, like, master over my thoughts. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff I got to still learn from it. So
Yeah.
I'm just trying to, but for the most part, it helps me, and I see things a lot clearer, and I'm starting to get it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I'm starting to understand. So yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
There's in our tradition, it has I think like the spirit in what you're talking about there, like just really, or what you said at the beginning about being present, just being really present, and collecting the mind is another term we use here. One thing I would mention is in the Zen tradition, what I found helpful is there's kind of a simplicity to it. So like in meditation instruction, we say that just to follow the breath is what the instruction is, which for me is helpful in that there's no object, or there's no even kind of like objective type of instruction to it. It's just because there's plenty there going on. Like you say, all the thinking that's going on is plenty of a reminder just to come back right whenever that comes up. So even the notion of trying to master the thoughts, or even the notion of trying to make thinking quiet down, can actually be an idea in some ways, and we can actually end up sometimes chasing after that in some sense. So that'd be one thing to consider in practice, is just following the breath. And at least again, from my situation, the simplicity of it sort of helps my practice. So just following the breath, thinking comes in. And then another interesting thing I've noted is I would even have the assumption that I'm coming back to the moment, but actually the moment that thinking is seen, we're back already. It's not like, it's like awareness is right now, but there's a tendency to like think about, oh, I shouldn't have been thinking, or whatever else. So thinking itself is enough of a reminder just to come back and be here and then stay here. But yeah, it's quite a practice. And it's relatively new, I think, in our Western world to focus on the rather incessant thinking that goes on for all of us. It's just kind of like, it's a new tradition in a lot of ways, I think, for all of us. So, but yeah, thanks for those comments. Anything else? Sorry, I didn't have more Planet of the Apes quotes said, and it's like, how can I fit? I think some of them have a little bit of profanity in that too, so it's just like, I can't weave this in here. All right, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.